Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to Commute Talk. I have the car again today, so we're back on the highway in the pissing rain. But it's okay, because things are going to be okay. So, today, Krigun writes in asking about a video I made a while back about the interview process at Nokia and Apple that I went through and how I ended up getting those jobs. And if you want to check that out, I'll put a link in the description. It's basically like a detailed breakdown of each of the questions during those interviews that I could remember. And maybe you'll find it interesting. But the question today is about the sort of missing part 2 of that video, where I would talk about what I consider a good interview, I guess, and also if I'm on the hiring side, what am I looking for, and like how do you do that side of things, and how do you decide who to hire, and all of the biases that go into that. So thank you for bringing up the subject, because it is interesting. It's definitely not something I'm super knowledgeable about, but I've been on both sides of the interview process many times, and I guess I would consider it just a necessary aspect of running software organizations. So starting with what I think makes a good interview, I would have to say that I do think that the standard, typical whiteboard interview is perfectly fine. I don't enjoy conducting them. I don't enjoy being interviewed that way. But at the same time, I also don't want to work with someone who would fold under the microcosmic pressure of a whiteboard interview. And that's like a personal preference, right? But I prefer to work with people who can handle a little bit of pressure. I myself tend to thrive under pressure, at least productivity-wise. Maybe I don't like to be under pressure forever, but every now and then it's good to have a little pressure to squeeze out some amazing performance. And that's just how I roll, and I like to work with people who are the same. And you know, it reminds me of sports a lot. I guess not that I'm a big sports fan, but this idea that like you put a bunch of good athletes on a team and they can push each other to do better. I think that makes perfect sense in anything that you do together with people. Like excellence breeds excellence, and like a little tiny bit of pressure is very good for like this synergizing, pushing each other thing. I don't know, I like that. And the whiteboard interview, I think, is a great way to create a little microcosm of that for half an hour or 40 minutes or something like that, where you just get to push someone a little bit and see if they fold or if they focus. And obviously, like, I also want to talk to the candidate and just find out what they're about, and a little bit of chit chat, you know, because you want to get a feel for the person. Like, are they comfortable in their skin? Are they comfortable talking about technical concepts? Are they comfortable, you know, just comfortable in general? You want to just get a feel for the person, because I think something that a lot of the tech industry does very right is that it has engineers interview potential engineers, very commonly at least, because in many other industries you interview not with your future coworkers but with other staff, right? And interviewing, like being an engineer and getting to interview your potential future coworkers, it's really awesome because you get to participate in the choosing of who you get to work with. And it's awesome when you're being interviewed because you get to talk to people who are on the same sort of frequency as you are, ideally, and you can just have a much more interesting interview that way. So I don't know, I just really like that style of interview that the tech industry is doing, even though it's kind of painful sometimes to go through. And I know a lot of people don't like it, and I know a lot of people think that you are limiting the type of candidate that you hire if you put pressure on everyone, because some people don't do well under pressure. But that's just my personal preference, but I would rather work with people who do okay under pressure. So when it comes to conducting interviews, I guess what I'm most hoping for whenever I go into an interview as the interviewer is that the candidate is going to be interactive and responsive and comfortable. And I mean, obviously there's only so much, you can only be so comfortable in an interview where you're looking for a job, because there's always that little edge to it. But I guess some of the best interviews I've ever had with people have been where they didn't, I gave them some problem and they didn't know how to solve it, or they didn't know a great data structure for the issue or for the problem or whatever, but they knew how to talk their way to a solution. So candidates who ask questions and are not afraid to say like, oh, I don't know how to do this, but let's try to work something out. And then they start asking questions. And for instance, I like it if a candidate sort of knows about a data structure but has never actually used it, and then they can ask details about it, and I can just feed them the details and they can implement it from my description. It's that sort of thing, like seeing someone do that, and that's so valuable, I think, because that's exactly the type of skill that you're looking for in a developer. Like someone who's able to think on their feet, I guess. That's always the dream, to have a bunch of coworkers who can think on their feet, right? If we all had that, then we would be so much better off. And certainly when I've been interviewed, I didn't always know the right answer, the right data structure to use. And I always like to just say, well, I don't know what kind of data structure to use here, but what if we just stitch something together with vectors and hash tables, and we can take it from there. And that always seems to get a good response, because you're not going to know everything, and nobody expects you to know everything, but what they're looking for is, can you think on your feet? Can you do you know how to ask for help? Do you know how to ask for information? Do you know what information you need to look for? Can you improvise? And to that end, I guess the type of question that I like to ask is anything where you can solve the thing, like a programming problem that you can solve with very basic building blocks, and maybe there's a clever solution too, but something that you can solve with basic building blocks, just so I can see if the person can program or not, but not this cookie cutter standard problems that have been asked like a million times, and people practice them because they're part of these lists of like questions you will get asked in FANG company interviews. Because I mean, there are books about this, right? And I don't know what they're called. I've never actually read those books, but I know that they exist, where they just list all these programming problems that you get asked at big companies. And obviously, I don't care how well someone can memorize those types of things. So lately, I've been thinking about a question to use, which is something that came up when I was working on the Windows server in Serenity, and it's about rectangles. So very often, you have a set of dirty rectangles on the screen that you have to paint because they changed since the last screen update, and sometimes the dirty rectangles overlap a little bit, because like you have two windows that intersect a little bit, and there's this part of them that overlaps, and if both windows are opaque, say, then there's no need to paint the window underneath there's no need to paint the window underneath in that intersection, right? Because it's not going to be visible and it will be completely overwritten by the window on top. So very often in Windows Server, you want to take a bunch of rectangles, like these dirty rectangles, and then compute the set of rectangles that you would end up with on top, if that makes sense. Like the set of unique rectangles where there's no overlap that would cover the same area as the rectangles you had. And I thought that was a really fun programming problem to work on myself, and I think it sort of fits the interview format. And if I wasn't just telling it to the world, this is probably the thing I would do in my next interview that I was conducting, because you can solve this problem in many ways, and you can solve it very naively and a bit more cleverly, and probably very cleverly in ways that I haven't thought of. I ended up doing a medium naive solution. But this type of problem, that is simple, you can understand it, but you haven't seen it before, maybe, hopefully. But you can certainly solve it in 30, 40 minutes if you're a competent programmer. So, yeah, I guess that's the kind of thing. And then when it comes to like hiring people, and the biases that people have, and like you mentioned that like people tend to hire other similar people. I don't know about that. Like, I've interviewed so many different people, and I never felt that anyone was particularly similar to me, although maybe I do have a slight bias for people who are self-taught that I should be aware of. But those people also tend to do really well in technical interviews. So maybe it's not the worst bias in the world, but it's something that I need to be aware of, and we all need to be aware of our biases. But ultimately, what matters to me, at least, is hiring the best candidate. And I know that at many companies, bigger companies especially, it's very trendy lately to request that people look for attributes other than this is a good candidate, but that's not something that interests me, and I think that it's a very counterproductive thing to be doing, and I'll just let other people do that stuff. If I'm choosing my coworkers, I'm just going to choose the best players and the people who focus under pressure. And it's fun when you see someone thriving under the pressure of a whiteboard interview, because then you can push a little bit more and see what else they can do, right? That's really awesome. And if you are comfortable, if you're like me and you're pretty comfortable with yourself with programming concepts and stuff, then seeing someone else focus like that, it's really fun. Like, I'm mentoring this university student at work, and he's pretty sharp, and it's really fun when he doesn't know how to do something, and then he comes to me for some tips or guidance or whatever, and I like to just give him these little breadcrumbs that I know will take him to the solution, because it's so much fun to watch him work it out for himself, and just all of the extra learning that goes into that following of the trail rather than just being given a solution. It's really, I do think it's really good for people. So something that we've been doing lately is doing a lot of networking stuff at work, and just building these very ad hoc, hacked together little networks for testing stuff. And I was showing him that you can make SSH tunnels and like just like showing it a little bit, like, here's what you can do with SSH, the SSH command, like, check this out, and just hinting at the absurd Swiss Army knife potential of SSH tunneling, and just the sheer scope of the problem space that you can attack with SSH tunnels. When it comes to hacking things together, I should say, it's fascinating. And I already see this guy, this kid. He's putting together these things with it, and I don't know. It's fun to see people focus and like take things to heart, roll with it, and learn. And I don't know. I guess another thing that I'm looking for when I'm hiring people is, do they like programming? Do they love it? If I have the if I'm in a place where I have the privilege of being able to hire only people who love it, then that's pretty awesome. And I always try to take advantage of that situation, because it's not, in reality, that's not the case at every place of work, right? Not every employer prioritizes hiring people who love what they do, or who love programming, or who even enjoy programming. Some businesses just want to get stuff done, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, I personally like to be in places where the company puts value on employees loving what they do. And that's what I look for in people I interview lately, which, I mean, I have to admit, I haven't been interviewing that many people lately because we're currently not super hiring, but hopefully that will ramp up in the future where I work. Anyways, I guess I don't know what to say more about this. So these are just some of my thoughts about this subject, I guess. And I hope I answered your questions, because now I can't remember all of them. But thank you for bringing this up. It's an interesting subject. I can tell that I need to think more about it, because my thoughts are not 100% clear. But I think by talking, so you just did me a huge favor by making me talk about it. So I think I'm out of steam here. I'm gonna stop talking. So thank you everyone for hanging out with me on the commute. Thank you Krigan for sending in the question. Everyone else, you're very welcome to submit questions or comments or whatever below. I will try to get to everyone at some point, eventually, hopefully, if I don't forget. Still have some stuff in queue. So let's just have a great day, everyone, and I will see you next time. Bye.